Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Red Hour, a show I do twice a week where I throw a little bit of chaos into Star Trek by reviewing a random episode. So, today's episode, I'm going to be talking about Voyager, Season 2, Episode 4, Elogium. So, I've seen this episode before, but it didn't really stick out to me, and I didn't remember it until I started watching it. So, but I wanted to talk about Elogium, because I had no idea what that fucking meant, and basically, it's basically an effort to preserve a legacy and to inspire future generations by highlighting exemplary qualities and deeds. Uh, a way to ensure that the deceased are remembered not just for their existence, but for positive contributions they made. So that's basically what it means. There's more to it than that, but it's a word that I was not familiar with, so I wanted to familiar myself with it. And I can see why the writers chose this title, because there's discussions in this episode that talk about that, and we'll get there when we do, and I'll talk about it when we get there. So our teaser starts off with Chakotay heading to the turbo lift, and he catches two crew members making out. So that's sort of an awkward moment for them and him. And then all of a sudden, you see Cass and Tom Paris carrying some plants, and they're basically heading to the mess hall, and they get on the turbo lift with him. The crew members walk away. He's like, "What was that all about?" Or Paris is like, "What was that all about?" And Chakotay just kind of blows it off, and then they carry the plants to, it turns out to be cabbages, and that they had picked up from, I guess they had picked up from either trading or had gone to some planet. But they got some cabbages that Neelix wants to use to incorporate into the meals. And Paris says, "I'll see you later." And Cass is like, "Oh yeah, right." He walks away, and Neelix gets all pissy and is all jealous, and thinks that, and he's like, "Are you going to be seeing Tom Paris later? Because he said see you later, and you said right, And I guess you could be forgiving for him not knowing a common Earth expression or whatever, but it's still, in these early seasons of Voyager, I've talked about this before, where they keep making Tom Paris, they keep hinting at maybe he's gonna have a love interest with Cass, and there's even an episode where he does have a relationship with her, but it's some kind of weird time travel thing. But they keep trying to do that and make Neelix jealous, and I talk about how on Strange New Worlds and Discovery, has sort of teenage type dialogue, but you can see it here too. So just the it's not just the new shows; it's the older shows too. Occasionally, although it doesn't seem as bad or as jarring. So I don't know, but and I am going to talk about Strange New Worlds season 3, episode 7, but that won't be until Wednesday at 9 o'clock. So on the bridge, Chakotay enters the bridge, and here we get another one of those classic Star Trek. There's some sort of, and this time it's some sort of magnetic disturbance. And Chakotay is talking to Janeway, and he's talking about these crew members that were making out. And he says, we should establish some sort of, I just said it there too, some sort of, establish a fraternizing policy. And she's kind of pushes back and is like, Starfleet's never really gotten into other people's personal lives. And I say, Janeway, you are wrong, because you interfered with Harry Kim's personal life in a later episode. So then she's like saying how it's a long voyage and people are gonna, basically people are gonna fuck, so she doesn't really go along with that. And then something says on the screen, there's a type of enigmatic vapor cloud. It's like a red cloud, and they zoom in, and there's a bunch of like life forms in the cloud. Then it switches back to Kess's quarters, and she's looking at these plants and stuff, and she grabs like there's like a glass square, a cube thing with these bugs that some of the bugs that were on the plants, the cabbage, she's like taking them off and collecting them into this container, and then all of a sudden just takes a handful of the bugs and eats them without realizing what she's doing, then does it again, and then looks down and realizes she's eating bugs, and she kind of freaks out, and that's the end of the teaser. So we get our theme credits. So it turns out that there's like 2,000 life forms in this cloud, and they're studying the life forms, and the life forms are kind of flapping like tails or something and propelling forward that way. So they use farts, and Janeway says flatulence, so they use farts to propel themselves, and likens it to some an earth animal. I don't remember. And then back in Kess's quarters, she's like eating all this crap, mashed potatoes, apples, all this stuff, and then Neelix shows up, and she like hides it real quick. He brings her flowers to apologize for being jealous, and he's talking to her and and she doesn't remember him this, and but then she's like, oh yeah. Then Neelix finds the food that she's hidden. And so he tells her, look, I've been eating all this stuff, this mashed potatoes that Ensign Wildman told me about, and with butter. And I've ate like, I think she said 6 bowls. And she's just like eating apples and going crazy. And he wants to take her to sick bay, and she doesn't want to go. So, and she doesn't know why she's doing this. And then Neelix basically grabs her, picks her up, and carries her out. And she's like flipping out and stuff. Then back on the bridge, the ship is being pulled by these life forms. They're like magnetic, and they call it a swarm. And it's like a magnetic. They're creating like magnetism that pulls the ship in, and they kind of get stuck, and they don't want to use. There's nothing really wrong with the ship. The warp drive works and stuff, but they don't want to use warp drive because they're afraid it would like kill them or something. And so Janeway turns to Torres, and throughout this whole episode, Torres is pissed off. And this whole show began because I wanted to do a review of an episode of Voyager which gave Torres, B'Elanna, like character growth, and wasn't all so focused on her being pissed off. This whole channel started like that because I watched that episode one day. I forget the name of it. It's in the playlist. It's actually episode 2, but I had already done an idea for section 31, so I named that one was the first one, but it wasn't a random episode. But I forget the fucking name of it. But anyway, I started that off because I watched that episode, and at first I didn't, but the first time I watched it, I didn't like it. I thought it was kind of dumb and cheesy. And it is kind of dumb and cheesy, but I watched it again and really sort of understood what they were trying to do with that one. And it wasn't perfect. But then there was thoughts that I had that I didn't have before. And it was basically, how B'Elanna was behaving in that episode, and I think it's from season 6, episode 22, I believe. And then I go back to these earlier episodes, or the earlier seasons, and it's the same crap. It's that that's she's just always pissed off, and and they don't give her. That's her character, is a pissed off woman. But anyway, just a little side note there. So she's pissed off, and she thinks that, what if they're attacking, and what if they're being aggressive? And she, it's kind of like Worf, when Worf thinks the aliens are being aggressive, and he wants to attack them and stuff, and Picard's like turns that idea down. That's like all throughout TNG, Worf's ideas are turned down, except for like every once in a while. So Janeway wants to find a solution to get them out of there, and asks B'Elanna to come up with a solution. She says we can do an inverted magnetic pulse to to use like the thrusters, but whatever that means, it pushes them away from the creatures. So back in sick bay, Kess has erected like a force field and is keeping the doctor out, and she's like all she's kind of like catatonic in a way, and just like can't speak. And the doctor asked Janeway to come to the sick bay, and she, Neelix is whining to the captain. Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, Neelix is whining to the captain, telling her that Kess won't let the doctor like kicked him out of sick bay because he's being like super annoying. Shocker. And so he goes and talks to Janeway and is basically whining and like says that Kess is sick, and then the doctor calls Janeway to sick bay, and Neelix is trying to talk to her, and she won't listen. So Janeway tries to talk to her, and basically, and the doctor says that there's like some kind of growth on her back, and they think all of this is related to these creatures, like somehow causing these problems. And then I'm thinking, well, if they wanted to go that route, you would have other people, other crew members having problems too. Like Tuvok is like turning into a raging lunatic, or whose logic has failed him or something. But they're just focusing on Kess, and basically Janeway talks to her, and she agrees to let down the force field, and she's all she's asking, did the doctor tell you what's going on, and da da da. And basically what it is she's going through her version of puberty, but it's like 2 years too soon. And the thing on her back, well, okay, so her species, Ocampans, give birth through their back, I think, but they still have regular lady parts, so I don't know. That's that episode I was talking about, where Tom was like her husband, and they showed like her giving birth like through her back or something. It's weird. It's like a timey-wimey thing, but and so Janeway kind of says, everybody goes through this, and you'll be all right, and we'll get you through it. But the caveat is that this is like her only chance. This is the only time she will go through this or whatever, and the only chance to like have children. And she really wants to have children. So she wants Neelix to be the father. Anyway, in Janeway's ready room, Chakotay and Janeway are talking, and this is what I was talking about earlier. Passing on a legacy. The whole theme of this episode is like having children and what it means to be a parent, and then passing on your legacy. And then they're talking about how it's going to be a long time before Voyager gets back to Earth. And even though Janeway wants to find a quicker way, they should at least think about the crew, having kids and stuff, and uh, and so that's kind of like the discussion, and so it's like an overall theme, like passing on your legacy, having kids, what it means to be a parent, the responsibilities of parenting, passing on your legacy, and then passing on knowledge, so that the crew, if it does become a generational ship, the crew will be prepared for the next, and kind of interesting discussion. But Voyager never really does much with it. So there's that. So anyway, in Kess's quarters, Neelix and Kess are talking about things like being a father, and he keeps like basically making excuses for why he doesn't want to do it, and how he his life, his lifestyle up until now has been sort of nomadic, and wouldn't really fit with like raising a kid and all this stuff. And then she has like this goo on her hands that basically is like a bonding glue, and they have to do like 6 days of bonding, and then after that they have 50 hours to do the deed, and then or they lose it and she can never have kids. And it seems like they were just like really trying to come up with some alien concepts here, that just stick with the basics. But anyway, so Neelix kind of leaves and goes to the mess hall where Tuvok shows up, and he gets something to eat and sits down, and then Neelix sits down with Tuvok, and he's like, "You have kids, Mr. Vulcan," and they have that. Tuvok has that discussion, about how it's a responsibility that you carry, and it's not always easy, but he thinks about his kids all the time, especially now that they're in the Delta Quadrant, stranded. And then Neelix sort of pivots and changes his mind. He's like, I think it'd be really fun to have a boy, and the things that I could teach him, and blah blah blah. And then Tuvok reminds him that there's also a possibility that you could have a girl, and he's like, "Oh, I don't think I could teach her anything, and the mother would have to do that," and all this. It's kind of a ridiculous discussion, but whatever. I almost felt watching this episode like somebody had a pregnant scare, like one of the writers, and they were just thinking out loud or something. I don't know. Back on the bridge, the inverted magnetic pulse is working, but then there's a massive energy drain, and these life forms have attached themselves to the nacelles. So they're trying to figure out why and how to deal with that. And then a bigger creature shows up, and they say, well, somebody says, what if that's the like the mother or something? And then Chakotay's like, well, it could also be like the the other, the male or the female, like a mating partner. And they basically figure out that this creature is doing similar activities to what they're doing with this magnetic pulse thing, and some smaller creatures attached to it in the same way. So they figure out that Chakotay was right. They're like looking for a mate. So they're like rivals. So back in Kess's quarters, Neelix comes back and says he wants to be a father. And he he's very excited about it. He's thought about it, and he said earlier, he didn't really put much thought into it, and now he's put thought into it, and that's what he wants. And Kess says that she has to go through this ritual where normally her father would perform, but her father's not there, so she gets the doctor to perform it. And basically, he has to massage her feet to make her tongue kind of swell. So again, they're trying to introduce like these alien concepts that are, different from humanity, with all the goo on the hands and all the stuff. And it's, good on them for trying, but it just like I said, just stick to the basics. Like you don't have to do all that. And so the doctor's talking to her, and she starts having second thoughts, and then she basically is like, I'm not ready to be a parent. And so you have a similar conversation that Neelix had with Tuvok, but comes to the opposite conclusion. So back on the bridge, they want to do like a short burst of impulse, and the larger creature like attacks the ship, and then they launch a probe, a class 4 probe. What, I don't know what that means. I haven't looked at the technical manual since the 90s. And then here we go with B'Elanna again saying, we need to attack them back. And Chakotay basically agrees, maybe it's like some sort of, like when deer butt heads and stuff, the lock horns, and, whoever wins is the dominant mate. But that doesn't work. The bigger creature, attacks again. So then they're like, maybe we should kind of sort of roll over and change their colors and make it so the bigger creature is more favorable for these smaller creatures. And so they flip the ship over and make it look like they're a different color. I forget how they do that, through gas or release some gas or something. And it makes the Voyager looks blue. And the small creatures attached to the detached from the nacelles. Then in the mess hall, Kess is talking to Neelix, and he's all bummed out because she decided not to have a kid with him, and she says that the doctor thinks that it was a false thing, period, or whatever, and because of the creatures were interfering, so that they could, later on, when she is ready, they can have kids. And then it ends with Janeway in her ready room doing a captain's log, basically talking about that discussion that she had with Chakotay about uh, the crew and making it a generational ship. And then Ensign Wildman comes in and tells her that she's pregnant, and that's the episode. And basically, I gave it a 3 out of 10. Uh, it's it's nothing. It's just a bad acting from Jennifer Lean. Atrocious, shall I say? Oh, yes, it's not a good one, and I predicted it wouldn't be because it's season 2. It doesn't really get good until 7 of 9 comes on. There's some episodes here and there, as always is with Star Trek, but it's really the third, tail end of the third, beginning of the fourth. So let's check the chat. Anybody? Oh, Gavin Blackburn is here again. Early Voyager, yeah. I mean, good God. Okay, so not much else to say. Nothing that I watched, on the rewatch made me go, oh my God, I didn't think of that. And then, wow, these guys are smarter than I thought. And this episode's way better than I thought it was, no. Sorry. My opinion is pretty much the same. So let's go to portion of the night where fate chooses the next episode. As you can see, it's still there. I didn't mess it up. And I'm going to randomize it again. Oh. Deep Space Nine. Whoa. Deep Space Nine, Episode 7. Season 6, Episode 7. You are cordially invited. This one might get me in the feels zone, because this is where Worf and Jadzia get married, and it's a fucking great episode. So glad I didn't get a shitty Voyager episode for next time. So I want to thank you're a super fan. I want to thank you for coming out, Gavin, and thank anybody that's lurking, and anybody that watches this in the future. I'm the Dead Man, and this is the right hour, and I will be back on Wednesday night, 8 p.m. to do You Are Cordially Invited. Can't wait. And then at 9 I will be doing my review of Strange New Worlds Season 3, Episode 7. I forget the name of it, but it's not that good. But so spoiler, there you go. You can skip the review. It's not that good. I don't know what they were thinking with this one, actually. And I tried to get to the review earlier today, but couldn't. So it's hard to do 2 in a row on a Sunday because of my schedule. But Wednesdays I'm off, so it's easier. I'll see you guys later. Have a good night.